Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Janine Between the Lines, literature and lifestyle for leisure. I know it's been a while. But I'm bringing it back, taking it back down to my roots. And today's episode is going to be all about some triggering chats with Dorian Gray. Today's episode is going to be all about The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I've had this one bookmarked for a while, so again, if you're new here, welcome, hello. You don't have to be a fervid reader or a read-along person with my podcast to be able to get triggered by all these chats we're about to have. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Yeah! I feel like I haven't recorded in so long. I'm not even used to hearing my own voice anymore. And that's just sad because I missed it. I missed you guys. How is everyone? I keep telling myself I'm going to start the podcast going straight into my topic, and maybe in the future I'll put in quips and unrelated topics at the end. But just a tiny update. Work's good. I've been on my shiz lately. It's been keeping me busy. I haven't been able to devote a lot of time to reading. But, now that I'm getting into the groove of things, it's just taken a lot of prioritization. And like Kylie Jenner, it was just a year to kind of find myself. But technically, I'm still in that process in terms of how I need to budget out and a lot what's important to me, because I got a lot of things going on. I'm a scatterbrained individual, and I have a tendency to spread myself thin. So between getting myself settled here, which it's amazing, I love Nashville, and juggling work and my health and fitness and my involvement in outside kind of communities and associations, how could I can't forget why I started this, So it took me a little bit to get back in the groove, but I'm confident, and wonderfully ready to get back into the swing of things. Thank you guys for sticking around. I'm very grateful for anybody that's been a listener or who's listening now, or even any of you in the future that are going to listen. Makes me really happy. And even if nobody was listening, guess what? I'd still be doing this, because isn't that what life is about? So, Dorian Gray. The Picture of Dorian Gray. Okay, a little backstory, says I, for the 547th time. The reason why I picked up this book, so I don't know if you guys remember, I had like a something of a out-of-body existential experience when I experienced Second and Charles for the first time, and one of those books that I picked up was Dracula and Dracula's Guest by Bram Stoker, and The Picture of Dorian Gray, because my brother, him and I were extremely obsessed with the show Penny Dreadful on Netflix. Please. We heard news that it's coming back. So we loved... There's just so many layers to that show. Like, you think you're just getting one thing about, like, werewolves and stuff, but no, they add vampires, and that's not all. Guess what? Frankenstein's in there. And then they add, like, just a bunch of... You wouldn't think that a show could mix up all these different, like, scary historical entities, but they did it beautifully. And I'm extremely sad that they canceled it. And Dorian Gray was one of the characters. And I have to say, applauds to... Who produced this book? It's a Wordsworth edition. But I'm really happy with how, well, it goes both ways. Dorian Gray in the Netflix series Penny Dreadful, the character, the actor that plays him, I should do more research and look up his name, but I think that he was a perfect fit for that role. He embodies what this book tries to translate or tries to get across. He's a perfect character for it, and that doesn't happen a lot with me. Remember I told you guys I'm a book snob? I get upset if the message in my head that I read from a book does not match the character on the screen, which is why I don't like to watch movies, movie adaptations of books. I was broken with Twilight. I was really broken. Edward, come on. I'm going to get mad hate for that. But it happens when you love a book that much. But again, first of all, applauds to, I guess, the casting crew for picking him, because it was amazing. And also, this this guy on the cover, he's strikingly handsome. And the photo is strikingly terrifying. The cover really caught me, and I was more than stoked to have been able to pick this used book up for $4.99. How amazing is that? So, I don't know, out of my listeners, well, one, I didn't announce that this would be the next book I was reading because I am an organizational hellhole right now. But to give you guys a brief kind of history that I gleaned from this foreword that the author wrote, or the one that he made the introduction. His name is John M.L. Drew. And I was excited to read it because of the foreword. The foreword got me hyped, and I never read the forewords of books. I'm it's just another author telling you what he thinks about it, you know? That's disrespectful of me, me calling myself a freaking reader. But as you can see, I'm trying to correct myself. Anyways, so Oscar Wilde, as an author, he was pretty controversial. So when this book came out, this literally actually happened. So in the 1800s, he wrote this book, and it pretty much was Oscar Wilde's perspective on how messed up society was at this time. And all of his comments towards, how the wealthy are corrupt, homosexuality, which was pretty much, you might as well, just die rather than be homosexual at that time. Things that, when I think of the 1800s, I think of prim and proper women that stay home, are told to be polite, and then you think of men go to work and those very nice suits and all those kinds of things, That is such a specific 1800s reference. I don't know how I pull it out of me. That's what she said. And just flipping through, it's just talking about how dissatisfied that Wilde was in his in society, just in general. So when he published this book, there was pretty much a nationwide outcry of what the fuck? Look at this crazy guy just challenging everything that we know. And nobody liked it. Some of the things that he wrote in this book were extremely offensive to a vast body of people that he was pretty much investigated and arrested and served time in jail for the things that he was saying. And that made me extremely interested. Apparently a lot of his accusers were, they were, upper class, high society individuals, and they tried to have him killed. But, in the preface of his book, he says that there is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. It's kind of just how you interpret it, which is what this podcast is about today. So, upon reading it, needless to say, here I go with my cliche terms. Needless to say, I was shooketh. I was super shook, guys. I didn't expect to be this shook over this book. I finished it in one day, just letting you guys know. That's very common for me, though, so I shouldn't, hype myself up about that. But I didn't sleep the whole night because I was reading it, and dually, yes, I loved it, but then I had an extremely terrifying nightmare about my brother, which we won't get into because I have the most morbid dreams known to man. I give this book a 10 out of 10. And the reason why I wanted to do this kind of topic for this podcast was, even in our culture right now, a lot of these things are, it seems perverse, and it seems against the grain. If a significant writer published this book at this time now, I think it would be the same outrage, and people would be trying, you can't freaking ban someone anymore for writing how they feel. There's not a lot of not a lot that's filtered out these days, unless there is, and I'm just a skewed mind. But I love it when old school books like these challenge my thoughts and force me to rationalize and see the author's side to the story, which I couldn't have said that before. If you would have given me a difficult book to read in, I don't know, say 6th grade or something, I'd be like, no, this isn't a story that's where you have to read and reread and just, I still loved books at that time, but I was a simple and sweet kind of gal. Easy storylines, nothing that made me think too hard, just things that would make me dream, nice daydreams, and kind of paint a nice little movie in my head. Those were the kinds of books I like. But in The Picture of Dorian Gray, I pulled a few quotes that were extremely thought-provoking to me, and I want to hear, I just want to talk about them a little bit, and also I want to hear you guys' opinions. So I called it a little agree or disagree segment. So I'm going to read a quote and talk on it, and I want to know what you guys think about what he's saying. So let's get started with chapter 1. I'll give you guys a brief kind of background behind the quote and what's happening. So this happened in chapter 1. There's a man here named Basil, and he's the person that painted the actual piece, the Picture of Dorian Gray, who is in love with Dorian Gray. The other character in this party is Lord Henry, who was pretty much the culprit of all the controversial sayings and beliefs and all of that things. And they're talking about the difference between genius and beauty. And one of the first things, in terms of the photo, Lord Henry is trying to convince Basil that just the beauty and infatuation that he's finding with Dorian Gray and the picture that he's obsessing over, it's not going to last. So he says, but there is no doubt that genius lasts longer than beauty. That accounts for the fact that we all take such pains to overeducate ourselves. In the wild struggle for existence, we want to have something that endures, so we fill our minds with rubbish and facts in the silly hope of keeping our place. The thoroughly well-informed man, that is the modern ideal. And then he goes on to say, someday you will look at your friend, and he will seem to you to be a little out of drawing, or you won't like his tone of color or something. You will bitterly reproach him in your heart and seriously think that he has behaved very badly to you. The next time he calls, you will be perfectly cold or indifferent. And then he goes on, what you have told me is quite a romance of art, one might call it. And the worst of having a romance of any kind is that it leaves one so unromantic. And I was like, I think that's a pretty mild one to start off on, and I slap an A on that. I agree with that. I think you learn at an early age, I don't know, because, everyone likes the very attractive people, and you have crushes on who's the cutest and who has the nicest body and who, is the most appealing. And that makes sense. That's human nature. But longevity-wise, wouldn't you rather not be talking to a really pretty brick? You know what I mean? He kind of not gloats, but he jokes at the fact that, yes, we fill our minds with things that we probably don't need to know, and people that focus on being beautiful rather than being educated or smart, they live a much simpler life. But it's not something that speaks to longevity. You're not going to want to, or maybe you will, later on in the book he touches on his thoughts of genius versus beauty a lot, but basically what I gather from what he's trying to say is that Dorian Gray was this beautiful creature. He was a youthful, beautiful, innocent. It seems like Lord Henry wanted to preserve that, but he wanted to preserve it and still would not invoke, but he would try to not intimidate. What's the word that I'm looking for? I guess he would try to goad him on into wanting to do something more and something scandalous and something that wasn't simply him just living in his beauty and through that, he has a weird way of saying it, but that last part where he said, what you've told me is quite a romance, as in him being in love with the painting that he just did and with Dorian, a romance of art, one might call it. And the worst of having a romance of any kind is that it leaves one so unromantic. So I think that's what it means. You fall in love with someone, if you fall in love with someone for their superficial beauty, how long is that going to last? It could last a long time. It could, because maybe that's all that you're looking for, and you're independent and self-sustained and having a conversation with a significant other. It's not a priority for you. You would rather them have, that's what you wanted it for. Say you're like, oh, she's hot. I'd date her. But what he's trying to say in my eyes is, so what if they're beautiful? So freaking what? I think this next one is one of my favorites, and it's somewhat of a long one, so bear with me. But this one is in the next chapter, and Lord Henry is at something of a gathering, and he's giving his thoughts and views on like how people realize themselves and just the human purpose in life. So he starts off saying, people are afraid of themselves nowadays. They have forgotten the highest of all duties, the duty that one owes to oneself. Of course they are charitable. They feed the hungry and clothe the beggar, but their own souls starve and are naked. Courage has gone from our race. Perhaps we never really had it. And then somebody tries to refute him, but he keeps on going. And he says, I believe that if one man were to live out his life fully and completely, were to give form to every feeling, expression to every thought, reality to every dream, I believe that the world would gain such a fresh impulse of joy that we would forget all the maladies of medievalism and return to the Hellenic ideal, to something finer, richer than the Hellenic ideal it may be. But the bravest man amongst us is afraid of himself. Skip over some. We are punished for our refusals. Every impulse that we strive to strangle broods in the mind and poisons us. The body sins once and has done with its sin, for action is a mode of purification. Nothing remains but the recollection of a pleasure or the luxury of a regret. The only way to get rid of a temptation is to yield to it. Resist it, and your soul grows sick with longing for the things it has forbidden to itself, with desire for what its monstrous laws have made monstrous and unlawful. It has been said that the great events of the world take place in the brain. It is in the brain, and the brain only, that the great sins of the world take place also. And he references towards Dorian. He said, you, Mr. Gray, you yourself, with your rose-red youth and your rose-white boyhood, you have had passions that have made you afraid, thoughts that have filled you with terror, daydreams and sleeping dreams, whose mere memory might stain your cheeks with shame. And that's pretty much it. And I was like, God dang. Okay, Lord Henry. So I remember my facial expression when I first read that. And can you read my facial expression in a sound? I was like, ah. I was like, okay. But then remember what I said in the beginning. I was like, okay. Do I agree or disagree? I'm gonna go through it piece by piece. So people are afraid of themselves nowadays. They have forgotten the highest of all duties and the duty that one owes to oneself. I wanted to curve that into the topic of how to be selfish with yourself and when being selfish is necessary, because I feel that. I agree with that part of the statement, that part of the quote, because, okay, I agree with it, but I don't think that there's anything wrong with devoting yourself to service and volunteering or anything that he's implying. But there is a time when you have to, in order to, well, one, be happy and reach your goals and, fulfill the things that you want. You have to put yourself before others, because putting others before you can be exhausting. And that's not to say that it's, it's not in a beautiful way, because being selfless and not catering, but helping others, what else would we want to do? You can't, it's impossible. Ooh, that's a big statement for me to make. It's not impossible to be just ignorant of other people that, are in better places than I am, at least. And it's been ingrained in me from the beginning that it's important to help people and to, get people on the right track. And sometimes, especially when it's somebody that you care about, you can't be selfish with yourself anymore, especially if you're in love or if you have a partner. You always have to take into account how something that you do, something that you say will make them feel or how it affects their life. But it's taken me a good amount of years to, progress and learn that there are some things that you have to, I don't want to say sacrifice, but there are things that you deserve to be selfish about. Whether it be your passions. You can have these things and not have to share them with somebody that you love. You can, pursue the goals and like your likings and your hobbies and things without having to have to consult other people, even if it's your lover or your partner. And I know I keep going into like the romantic route, but even with friends, I remember this was my first experience with being kind of taken advantage of. I think it was one of my old friends in middle school, and this is what happened. I was smart, was past tense, and she would only like talk to me to ask me for my homework, and because we were quote unquote friends, I would feel bad if I didn't help her out because she was on the cusp of getting like a bad grade, whatever a bad grade is for Asians, or like a B plus, like a low B plus, like an 85, like an 86.9. But yeah, so she kept asking me for my homework, and then our friendship started to just be like, if I didn't give her what she wanted, then either I would feel bad or she would make me feel bad about it. Is that just bullying? But I overcame that, and I learned that, well, she was being selfish with me, I guess, but then I had to kind of learn to like push it away. Like, no, this is my stuff. Please go away. I don't think that relates that hard, but I wrote down when being selfish is necessary. You have to have like your own thing that you can fulfill. If I keep saying in like so many more times, I'm going to throw myself out of this one story window. It wouldn't hurt, but it would just be super inconvenient. But yeah, I'm going to slap and agree on that first part. There are some parts in here that I disagree with. What he was saying about if one man were to live out his life fully and completely, were to give form to every feeling, I believe that the world would gain such a fresh impulse of joy that we would forget all of kind of society ideas. And no, I disagree with that. I think that we've got to have a little bit of control on our impulses. You can't just go around taking what you want, saying what you want. But remember how I'm trying to see both sides? I guess you could. And I just don't think that is a suitable, I don't think that our society is a suitable environment for that kind of person. It can be argued. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that our culture and our society right now is more open to being open? And I don't think it is. You will get railed on for any little thing you say. Everybody has to watch what they say. Everybody has to be afraid of their own opinions. Which I guess this is kind of Oscar Wilde talking about that in a way. Like, he doesn't like how we have to be so contained. So part of me agrees with that and part of me doesn't. He said, every impulse that we strive to strangle broods in the mind. The body sins once and has done with its sin, for action is a mode of purification. Now, that's interesting to me. That's a good quote. But the way that I took that, especially with the next sentence, let me read that. Nothing remains then but the recollection of a pleasure or the luxury of a regret. And the part that I'll slap an A on, A for agree, is just the idea of experience. You know, I don't want to directly tie it to sin. It doesn't have to be a sin. He just really likes to focus on like being naughty. Lord Henry, he's a naughty guy in this book. And I agree with the fact that in terms of action, like, you won't know how something feels unless you try it, and being open to that. And he says, I like how he says the recollection of a pleasure, like, hey, that was fun. Okay, in this context, it's making me sound like, ooh, yay, to sin is fun, but that's not what I mean. I mean, you should have the courage, like he's saying, you should have the courage to kind of say yes and go for it. Recollection of pleasure or the luxury of a regret. And I think what he means by that is the luxury that you learn from that, or you know you never want to do that again. And that's logical to me. The way that he phrases it makes it seem like, oh, go, I don't know. I don't want to say something weird. And then he says, the only way to get rid of a temptation is to yield to it. That resist it and your soul grows sick with longing for the things that has forbidden to itself. And I don't agree with that. I'm going to slap a D on that. And then it says, it is in the brain and the brain only that the great sins of the world take place also. I think that that's extremely true. In a smaller scale sense, I think that we make up our failures and our insecurities and stuff. They brood in our minds first, and we can slap a label on what we think is wrong and what we shouldn't do and why we shouldn't do it, and the thing that's stopping me and the reason why you aren't going to go through with something. And all of that is going on before you even have made a move to even try. So that was a big A/D/A/D quote. He's a pretty outspoken guy. And then later on in the book, or after this monologue that he does, Dorian Gray is kind of like, he's like, stop it, please. You're scaring me. I have to answer you, but I don't know what to say. And I think he put the people in the room like in their place. He knew how to leave everybody in the room ajar, to say the least. Ajar, I really like that word, ajar. It's just a single jar. If I technically wanted to be correct, I should have said left their mouths ajar. But you know me, just defying all the rules these days. Guys, I know I talk about my feigned intellect a lot, and I'm completely aware. There is complete transparency here. This episode is a total mess. But, you know, I decided to cut down on my editing. I'm not breaking things up and splitting and pitting and trimming everything. I'm not going to, because I need to listen back and kind of get back on my road and try to improve. So if you're this far along, then I applaud you. Give me an applause. Let's applaud each other. And I wanted to like kind of combine, because so that was like, what was that? 2 quotes already. These last 3 have to do a lot with romance and women, and these were like my high key I was about to say favorite triggers, but I don't want to say that because it wasn't like in a good way. I was just like, excuse me. Yeah, so this will be kind of my last chunk, and it starts right after, I want to say it's still chapter 2. So I've got about like 3 quotes where he's talking about romance and how women see it and how love is kind of a fallacy. And one of the first ones he talks about is about how women desire, like how women perceive like being in love forever. And these are pretty much just like sharp triggers on like how women want something that's unrealistic and why do they have to screw everything up. So he goes, always, that is a dreadful word. Women are so fond of using it. They spoil every romance by trying to make it last forever. And then in the following few pages he says, never marry at all, Dorian. Men marry because they are tired. Women because they are curious. Both are disappointed. I was like, God dang. And it's funny because Lord Henry is married, but he's very vocal about like it's an unhappy marriage and it's pretty much just for convenience. And his wife is well aware that not only does he have affairs, but that it's like he decides to stay because like, F it, I'll just stick around. I've got a lady at home. She does like what I need her to do, and that's all I need. But to the first quote, always, that is a dreadful word. Women are so fond of using it. They spoil every romance by trying to make it last forever. I'm going to disagree with that. I disagree. Okay, I agree with the fact that I'm not going to generalize, but of course we want a love that will last. Please tell me if you go into a relationship and you're like, oh, I hope this lasts for maybe like max 6 months. Like, you always want to feel that feeling of love with your significant other. And regardless of if, the sparks or the heat or, that honeymoon feeling like dwindles as, it fades. But the consistency of, the feeling that like you have each other and you love each other and you care, that doesn't go away. And that's an always thing for me. I found it really offensive that he said they spoil every romance. It's like right at the mention of like wanting to be together forever, or when you're like deep in a moment and you're like, I will love you forever. Does anyone do that? I don't even do that. That sounded weird. But like, I could just imagine him like visually. Lord Henry wasn't in Penny Dreadful, so I'm just imagining this like uppity, hipsterish, like old guy trying to defy the odds, and he's just like cringing at the fact of women wanting something to last. And it's kind of hypocritical because he's staying in this marriage that like he doesn't want to get out of. But he's already like fed up with it, but he's just staying out of convenience. Do you think that he's trying to say, like, you can only be like romantic for so long, and it's like silly for women to try to like keep igniting that and all of that stuff? I don't think so. I think he's just being crude. Somewhere else in the novel, let me see. He goes on to say a few other things about that. I didn't write down the entire quote, but yeah, he's just a kind of a crude guy. And then so they touch on level up, because at this point, later on in chapter 5 or 6, Dorian meets this girl. She's a performer, and he falls in love with her, and he wants to spend the rest of his life with her. And it's, oh man, yeah, there was much more to this quote than I wrote down. So, never marry at all, Dorian. Men marry because they are tired. Women because they are curious. Both are disappointed. I disagree. I do think that we are in a special time now where marriage is, valued less and less over time, and call it a bad or like a good or a bad thing. Like I grew up Catholic, and marriage is an extremely important, aspect of that religion. And I just think in our generation, people are, still being devoted to each other and like have these long-term relationships, but don't want to get married, which I'm not saying that that's flawed. I'm just saying that people like my age have come to the realization that you don't have to like sign something on paper to want to spend the rest of your life with someone, and that you don't have to pledge under your higher power that you love this person and you will stick with this person, and just trashing all the formalities. And that's become a commonplace thing, and that's just the reality of it. But men marry because they are tired. Do you think so? I want you guys to tweet me at JanineBTL. Do you think men marry because they're like, I guess I'll be with you? It's a big like settling connotation, and I think Oscar Wilde knows that he's saying that. And can you imagine in this era where it's like you either marry somebody or you're not with them? Like, so I can see why these are like triggering thoughts for like their culture. And he said women because they are curious. That piqued my interest. Women marry because they're curious. Like, oh, I wonder if we could have forever and always. Like, sometimes I feel like women, I kind of halfway agree with that. Because if you think about divorce, this is going to go so off topic. I'm already like, I'm trying to like put together my like, my nerve endings and how I want this to relate. But like, you marry someone and then you're going in, this is how I see it, unless you've been in a relationship for like a super long time and you've already lived together and have seen each other at your worst and at home and everything. That's not the case. I don't think that was the case in like the 1800s. So in a sense, I feel like that might have been right during his era. Like, women probably were like, oh, I wonder if this could work out. Like, I actually really like him. Let's see. In the most innocent way possible. So that's like a lowercase a. I slap a lowercase a on that. Because you never know at that point, at least, because you weren't living with your significant other before marriage, unless you were a rebel. And then he says both are disappointed. Men marry because they're tired. Women because they're curious. Both are disappointed. Both end up disappointed. That's crazy. I mean, I guess if you look at statistics, I guess you could say almost 50% of people are disappointed in their marriage because it leads to divorce. How's that statistic doing, by the way? I hope it's improving. But can you imagine, like, the population size is going to keep getting lower and lower because people are deciding not to marry? I don't mean to sound, like, incredulous at that. I hope I don't. Because part of me agrees with the fact that some people don't need to have a license and say that they're married to be happily, to spend their lives together with someone and live happily and live as if, and be lifelong partners, lifetime partners. So I disagree with the quote as a whole. Like, men and women don't just end up disappointed because they get married, like, romantically. And he shouldn't be like, never marry at all, Dorian. He's like 16 years old. Just stop. Let him have his first love. Let him feel the rush of it. He's just kind of a corrupt individual. And it's entertaining, but also I can imagine, like, this weird, creepy guy who's low-key also obsessed with Dorian Gray. Like, please, like, never marry at all, Dorian. Don't do it. You'll just end up disappointed. Now, the next quote, I can't wait till I don't sound super nasally. I've been back and forth with a cold. But, like, the following page is really interesting too. And he says this. He said, he's talking to Dorian again. They're still at this, what do they call it? They call it a salon when they have these little gatherings. He said, "My dear boy, people who love only once in their lives are really the shallow people. What they call their loyalty, their fidelity, I call either lethargy of custom or their lack of imagination. Faithfulness is to the emotional life what consistency is to the life of the intellect. Simply a confession of failure." And then he says, "The passion for property is in it. There are many things that we would throw away if we were not afraid that others might pick it up." And then, just to chunk this one in there, he says, "Romance lives by repetition, and repetition converts an appetite into art." That was another god dang. Should I just title this God Dang? COTDAENG. I've had a conversation about this with one of my very good friends, and I think it is a privilege and a blessing to have been able to love more than once in your life. And you become who you are because of the loves and losses that you experience, and it helps you to be, again, with the self-awareness, like, you're more comfortable with yourself. You understand what you want in a relationship and a romantic partner, and it's great memories once you're past the hump of being a little depressed and longing and wishing you had someone, and that weird phase where you're in between and all that. Like, when I look back on past, relationships and stuff, we've had some good times. It's been a balance of good times and bad times, but the memories and the learning experiences, like he says, I think it's worth it. And what I do disagree with is what he says about people who only love once are really the shallow people. I don't think that makes somebody shallow. He's just being mean. Like, you're not shallow because you want to love a single person and want to pour that into one single person. And then he says, faithfulness is to the emotional life what consistency is to the life of the intellect. Simply a confession of failure. No. No. I guess that the reason why I chunked that in with the bottom one, romance lives by repetition. Repetition converts an appetite into an art. Like, okay, Janine, see both sides. You're not a failure for being consistent and being faithful to your partner. Am I wrong? Somebody tweet me, tell me if you see it differently. I would, the only thing, like, I feel like my takeaway from this is very surface level, and it's hard for me to like see, like, be understanding of his position on this. It's like he's saying, like, you've failed if you decide to, like, not explore once you've found the person, like, that single person that you love. That's what I'm getting from it, and I disagree with that. But then I completely agree with the next one. He says the passion for property is in it. There are many things that we would throw away if we were not afraid that others might pick it up. I was like, that one's controversial. It's instinctual to want to own somebody, and I guess somebody you love. Like, you want to be the one and only for someone, and you want that someone to feel the same way about you. But I've had experiences where no, people aren't things. People aren't objects. You can't own them. You have to, give them a little room. What does that say about me? I'm not sure. You guys tell me. But there are many things that we would throw away if we were not afraid that others might pick it up. Like, when I think of that, I think of when you and your partner know that this isn't working out. Like, you ever get in that phase of where you know that you're unhappy, you know that, like, you guys, like, it's not compatible, you've been together for some time, and you've been thinking about separating, but there are things that hold you back, like the thought, say you've been together for a while, the thought of being single again and having to, like, keep looking, the thought of having to deal with allotting actual properties, like giving stuff away, the thought of being self-conscious of what other people are going to think of you guys, and then again the thought that, like, you've spent so much time and energy into this person, and it's kind of going back to that selfish feeling of, what if you do not like the idea of somebody else, like, picking up where you left off, or the fact that they could eventually have another relationship with somebody else. So you don't want to throw that away due to all those reasons. And it's crazy because you do, when you, at least in my experience, you, like, give a piece of each other to each other when you enter, into a relationship. And it is scary thinking that like there are other people in the world that will experience the same things that you did with that person. And then you go all like whiny, like, no, that's mine. I did it first. I had it first. This, like, you put your name on it. You branded that person. Sorry, that's weird. But, like, I think that love and what he said, like, the passion for property, like, belonging, I feel that. I think that he's... Okay, Oscar. I'll give that one to you. Just for now, though. The only props that you'll ever receive so far. Tell me how the audio quality is, guys. I'm in my room. It's a beautiful day. And, you know, I've had something of a past... These quotes right here and my past 2 or 3 months are like... Just paint a picture of me face palming myself. But I enjoyed reading it, and it's nice. Reading his, you know, opinions and things kind of helps me to reflect on what I need to decide on different things in my life and things of that nature. Take a shot every time. If you listen to all of my episodes, take a shot every time I say things of that nature. Brief. Like, you know? Alright, everyone. That was, those were a quick few quotes. Some agree, disagree, little excerpts that I want to share. I have a few others. Most of them were just quotes that I liked, so that nothing that would stir up a lot of conversation. So I'm gonna start recording again more often while I'm reading the book, rather than, I know I did this with Little Women and I saved everything until the end, but I much prefer being able to react in real time the way that I did with We the Animals, but I definitely got off track, and I don't feel that I did Justin Torres justice. It was a great novel. I didn't get to read the book because I didn't get to watch the movie or record on the last part because I don't want to sound unintelligent, or I don't want to, you know, put out something that didn't honor him. I thought the 2 episodes that I did with him were good enough for me to publish and honorable, in my opinion. So the next book that I'm definitely going to be reading, so this one was a classic. I've been in a spooky mood lately. I know we're much past Halloween, but winter in general makes me want to read scary, suspenseful novels. So I'm going even deeper back into my roots, and I'm reading a book that I was gifted for my birthday that's been sitting there. It's Salem's Lot by Stephen King, one of my favorite freaking authors. Yeah, I know, it's a typical favorite, but like in 2016 I made it a point to try to read every single Stephen King book that I could find, and I would go to the thrift store and I would buy all of those paperback books, like 45 cents each, and it would be like 5 Stephen King books at a time. It's a big goal to have, but I haven't really put that one down to rest. So Stephen King's Salem's Lot is next. It's coming up next for the next book that I'm reading. Who knows? I might F around and record a spooky sounding guitar intro. You never know with me. So I might be doing an OTT with a few friends that I've made here, depending on how it's looking. I was asked to do an episode about, I don't know how many of you would be interested, but it would pretty much be about like my moving experience and how my first few months in a nursing residency program has been going, and how I've been coping and what's my experience been and all that. So whether it's with guests or not, an OTT about life updates and funny stuff and things that I've been wanting to talk about is coming up too. So I just want to thank you guys so much for listening. Stay tuned for October 13th. Just kidding. October 15th of next year. No, it's just we had to put a few things on the back burner. My prod team, my sweet production besties are grinding their butts off back in Florida. Sometimes you just gotta take a back seat, let life do what it do, and we're gonna get everything on track once we're all settled and we can devote our our ultimate energy, like 100% of our efforts towards something that's going to be awesome. So apologies for anybody that I hyped up. If you know me in real life, I'm a big old hype woman. I say things, I'm like, yeah, I can beat you at this, but then I pretend that I'm injured because I was all talk in the beginning. But this isn't going to be all talk. It's not going to be all talk. It's coming. Again, thank you so much for listening. Favorite this podcast on Anchor. Follow it on Spotify. We're still getting Apple Music settled. My fault. That was a back burner for a while too. But anyways, if you love it, share it. Tweet me. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.